Well, good morning, everybody. And when you're old like I am, and some of, well, not you guys, you're too young, but some of you might remember back when they used to say, hello, everybody out in TV land. Anybody remember that? Oh boy. Hey, good, one.
I'm not going to bail you out.
Yeah, so again, good morning. Welcome to Bullseye Golf Club on a beautiful Friday morning. Again, we know we have lots of folks joining us through the virtual environment, and we thank you very much for that. I'm Craig Timm, so I'll be your moderator today, and again, welcome. And we want to thank our sponsors. We especially want to thank Bullseye Golf Club, the staff, and everyone that helped set this up. Those of you in the room, we're social distance. It's set up great, and you can imagine the extra work, the food and everything. So we want to be safe, and they also helped with the virtual. And I'd like to also thank Wisconsin Rapids Community Media for being here and providing this for the community. Our sponsors, I'd like to especially thank Domtar, Enbridge, and Ocean Spray Cranberries. Thank you very much. And at this time, if you would join me, if we can face the flag and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag for the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. I'll just put this on the table. We'd like to especially note that the Heart of Wisconsin Chamber staff have invited current elected officials from the region and also all opponents that are to participate in this event. Unfortunately, not all of the candidates were able to join us for today's session, but we wanted to make sure everyone knew that everyone was invited to participate if they could. What we're going to do this morning, we will have the elected officials in attendance, and along with their opponents, give a 5-minute talk on themselves and their platform and things that they're either have worked on or will be working on. After that part of the presentation, we have a series of questions. We will get some updates from our current elected officials, and then we certainly will have opportunity for folks in the audience to ask questions. And I'm looking at Angel, they can send you a note online? Okay, so do it through an email or just live?
There's live chat.
Okay.
They have my phone number for texting in questions.
Okay. So live chat, and also you can text in questions and we will work those in as we can. So it looks like we are expecting potentially 2 other folks, but why don't we start off? State Senator Patrick Testin, who represents District 24, if you want to give us a 5-minute discussion on kind of what your platform is and
Sure.
what you've been working on. And we're going to use the podium so that so folks at home can see us here.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Craig, and thank you to the Heart of Wisconsin Chamber of Commerce for organizing this event. It's certainly probably not how many of us envision 2020 going down, when normally we have a packed room here with all the candidates and giving their perspective and taking questions from folks from the business community. But it is what it is, and so we just deal with the cards that are dealt with us. So I'm Patrick Testin, State Senator for the 24th Senate District, in my first term, asking for another 4 years down in Madison. And one of the reasons why I'm running for re-election is because we've had a lot of success in recent years, especially for right here in the greater Wisconsin Rapids area, and there's a lot more work that needs to be done. You know, I think about the situation that we're in, and it's a night and day comparison. When you think about just going back to March when we met here, or not here, but here in Wisconsin Rapids for the annual chamber dinner, and I had the opportunity to be the keynote speaker, and we talked about all the great success stories here in the greater Wisconsin Rapids area and the bounce back that we saw from the Great Recession, where, you know, back in 2008, 09, there was a lot of uncertainty, factories were closing their doors, small businesses were on the brink of collapse. people were leaving the area, and there was kind of this cloud of despair that hung over here. And as the rest of the state and the country began this great economic recovery, since then, it seemed like this area kind of lagged behind. But then in recent years, we certainly saw a resurgence, and we saw the expansion of Alexander Field, Sand Valley, Metalco, and all these other great projects, the diversification of our economy. There was a lot to be proud of. And you go back to even just this past March, the biggest problem that we faced as a region and as a state was our economy was so strong that the biggest issue employers faced was that we didn't have enough workers to fill the jobs that were available. And then what happened? COVID hit. And just like that, like the flip of a switch, we lived in a much different world where unemployment spiked up to 14%. We have many small businesses that are on the ropes financially. We're dealing with the situation in Verso, and it's a much different atmosphere. That's why it's critical more than ever that we have the right leadership down in Madison as we begin to rebuild our economy, come out of the ashes of this economic downturn caused by COVID-19 so we can get Wisconsinites back to work, get businesses back up on their feet, and hopefully begin the economic recovery that we need to so we can ensure that central and western Wisconsin are moving in the right direction. So as far as some of the priorities going into this next biennium and next legislative session, if I have the opportunity to go back, is that, again, economic recovery, making sure we're getting Wisconsinites back to work. We have to continue to make sure, because even after November 3rd, we're still going to be dealing with COVID-19. We have to continue to make sure that our hospitals, especially our critical access hospitals, have the funds that they need available. And so those are going to be some of the main focuses that we deal with. Continue to expand broadband expansion as more employees are working from home. It's become apparent more than ever, even though you've heard me say this 1,000 times, that I view broadband as part of our infrastructure. As more people are working from home, as we have more classes being done online, we need to make sure that more houses, more businesses, more individuals have access to high-speed internet. So those are going to be some of the main areas that we focus on, so I will keep it short so we can have more time for Q&A and questions. And I just want to thank everyone for taking your time out of your busy schedules to tune in and be here in person today, and I look forward to a good discussion. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. Wisconsin Assembly District 72, Assembly Representative Scott Krug. That's 2 times now I've done that correctly, because remember I announced you as a congressman one time.
Yeah,
so.
we put that to rest.
Yeah, he's never forgiven me, but Scott Krug.
Good morning, and thanks everybody for attending in person or virtually, however it may be, and thanks to Bullseye and the Chamber for putting this event on and giving us a chance to discuss a little bit about the 2020 election. Obviously, as Senator Testin said, it's not an easy campaign cycle to get out to interact with people, so it's great to have a forum to be able to broadcast a little bit some of the message that we've had. It's one thing to see some TV commercials once in a while or to see some mail pieces, but it's nice to have a little face-to-face time. And face-to-face time has changed a little bit in 2020, obviously. So everybody virtually, thank you. And I encourage you, as Senator Testin said, with just the 2 of us here, we're going to have plenty of time for questions and answers. So please feel free to log on and make sure that you have any questions. Make sure that you reach out to Angel and let us know what we can help you understand about 2020. 2020 is kind of hard to understand, so maybe a little extra time today. We'll try to go a little longer. But anyways, I'm Scott Krug, State Representative for the 72nd Assembly District. That's the southern Wood County, northern Adams County, western Waushara County, and a small little sliver of southern Portage County and Almond and Bancroft. I just finished my 5th term, looking into my 6th term into the state legislature, and the way the legislature's turned over the years, becoming one of the more senior members already. And that's one of the things that when you look back at caucus and you turn around and you wonder who the heck are these people, because sometimes you've been there and they've come and gone pretty quick. So that institutional knowledge is something that we really depend on as far as going forward into the next cycle to understand where we've been and where we're going. And that story of where we've been, if you've been around Wisconsin Rapids for quite a long time, you know that the 2000s were very unkind to central Wisconsin, Wisconsin Rapids in particular. As much as we say 2020 is a bad year, I look back to years of 2008, 2009, 2010. Those years were absolutely awful for this area, and we saw job losses in the thousands and thousands and thousands as we kept bleeding industry after industry through all the things that were going on then. different day, 2020. Obviously, we're dealing with the Verso situation. That's one of the things that people have talked about a lot in this campaign cycle. You'll see ads of people talking about the legislature hasn't met, they haven't gotten together, they haven't voted on a bill. I want people to know, virtually or whether in person here, just because we're not in Madison crowded in together and non-socially distanced in the Capitol doesn't mean that we're not working for you. Every single day, Senator Testin, myself, others, area reps, VanderMeer and Shanklin, and even our Congressman Kind and others are working every day to try to figure out some of the things that we're facing challenges on, Verso in particular. The announcement this week, we'll talk about it a lot today. The fact is we have buyers for Verso. We just don't have a willing seller at this point. That's one of the things that the task force that we put together, Senator Testin and I, have been able to do is develop these conversations and this co-op idea that's come together, and other companies that we've reached out to have actually come together because of the work of the task force to say, hey, what's available, what can we do? And all those conversations have led to willing buyers coming to the table. Now it's time to get Verso to kind of take that next step. So I think we're in a really good place with that. As far as COVID, we're working on COVID issues every single day. We're dealing with our hospitals. We're making sure PPE's there. We did our bill back in March and April to make sure that we drew down $2 billion from the federal government. Without legislative action, that wouldn't have happened. Those $2 billion are sitting on the governor's desk right now in the Department of Administration. And if we want to hire more contact tracers, the money's there. If we want to do more testing, the money's there. For a big surge like we're facing right now for hospitals that have funding, the money's there. All the tools are available in the governor's office right now. So that's another thing we hear virtually through the campaign, and it's easy for people to use those things as things the legislature's not doing. But the fact is those things have been done. Those things are waiting for action. We've got, the governor announced he wanted to hire 1,000 contact tracers, and Senator Testin, as the chair of the health committee, can tell you where that process is. Those dollars are there, the action's been taken, and one of the things that I wish that the legislature could do is to make sure that COVID doesn't come into Wisconsin. We could write a bill saying it's illegal for COVID to be in the state of Wisconsin, but that's just not realistic. So we're working every day to try to figure out to mitigate those possibilities, working with our health departments to find common sense approaches to keeping schools open and businesses open. And we've done a really good job, and I give a lot of credit to our schools. I haven't heard much of any complaints about how things are going at the school level right now. There have been isolated incidences in each of my school districts. But our districts have done well. They've worked really well with our health departments. We've made sure to keep our contact with the county health departments open and fluid, and making sure that as needs come in, we're addressing those. Those are the two things moving forward that we've got to keep working on, is the COVID issues and finishing up this Verso situation. So that's the near-term future. We'll talk a lot more over question and answer over some longer-term things that we can deal with in the legislature next session. Just wanted to address those types of things. And again, thank you for your time this morning.
Scott. Thank you very much, Scott. What I'd like, if you are an elected official, and I know we have several in the room, if you could please stand, and maybe if you could just turn your camera there. If you're an elected official, please rise. Face the flag. No, we already did that. But again, thank you all for your service as elected officials in the central Wisconsin area. So I just wanted to recognize you and make sure the folks at home could see who was there. So thank you very much. And we do expect possibly a couple others, and we will work them in as we go. But our first question, again, you both mentioned a little bit about COVID, but COVID-19, the pandemic. We did receive a question. Obviously, it has and continues to have a devastating impact, especially on the local economy. The question is, how do you feel it was handled? And I know you addressed this a little bit, but hindsight, of course, can be 20/20. What would you, if anything, what would you do if we get through this and then it might happen in the future? I don't know if one of you would like to address that. You both have an opportunity, but just.
Sure. Yeah, and that's the tough thing is, as policymakers from federal, state, local, and everywhere in between, to be given an impossible situation and try to figure out a path forward and something that's unprecedented, it's always going to be a challenge. And I think, one of the silver linings that we've had because of COVID is we get an idea of if something ever happens again, how can we deal with it better? And that's one of the things that we have learned out of this is what the right response should be at the right time. And I think, we've done a really good job with our local hospitals over the last few state budgets to make sure that critical access hospitals are receiving extra funding, that they won't be able to turn away emergency situations, things like that. But one of the things we've got to figure out moving forward with COVID is building capacity. Capacity is the biggest thing right now. We try to flatten the curve, and we have been doing a great job of flattening the curve. Right now we can do a little bit of a better job, and to have to rely on a field hospital in the outskirts of Milwaukee for overflow, it's probably one of the biggest regrets that policymakers are going to have, is that we didn't think of extra capacity ahead of time. What those contingency plans should be ahead of time. To be reactive in government has always been one of the things that we've tried to avoid. But our reactivity here, we've reacted good, but I'd rather be a little progressive for the next time and make sure that we've got capabilities and availabilities for rapid deployment for critical access hospitals, to have more capacity for ICUs, to make sure that our ventilators, that we have the PPEs and the gowns and supplies of these things moving forward. So I think that's one of the things that, looking back, I wish we had been better prepared for our stockpiles and our capabilities for capacity. Senator?
I think Representative Krug brought up some good points there. I should start off by saying, back in February, back in March, when we didn't exactly know what we were dealing with, it was hard to really know for sure the severity of the virus. And if you remember back in March, early on, when the governor announced that we were going to do a safer at home order, essentially 14 days to stay at home to flatten the curve. And Wisconsinites, by and large, myself included, Representative Krug as well, we're all kind of in agreement. All right, we got to do what it takes to make sure that our frontline healthcare workers aren't overrun. Businesses, by and large, made great sacrifices in closing their doors, going to things like carry out and things of that nature, more online. But then as things progressed, it's easy to be an armchair quarterback. Anyone can look back and say, well, you should have done this or should have done that. But from my perspective, I always ask myself, is the cure worse than the disease? When you take a look at the lost economic activity when we are shut down for 2.5 months, the Badger Institute actually released a report back in late April that showed for every single day that the state of Wisconsin that was shut down, we lost nearly $180 million per day in lost economic activity. To boil that down for Wood County, that was per day $4.4 million. Places like Portage County, $4 million per day. Adams County, roughly $230,000 per day. And then you factor on the human cost that wasn't discussed. Call up Sheriff Becker or any of our police chiefs here in Wood County. They will tell you that what they have seen over the course of the last several months will disturb you. The number of suicide attempts that have gone through the roof, the overdoses that have gone through the roof, domestic abuse cases through the roof. I've talked to officers in Stevens Point who have said they can't keep Narcan in stock because they're going through it so fast. And when you take a look at study after study that's shown that for every 1% increase in the national unemployment, you can attribute an additional 37,000 deaths from things like mental health, disease, mental illness, all these different factors. So our message moving forward, since learning all of that, is that we have to take a holistic view of what's going on. We have to take the virus seriously. There's no question about that. People are getting sick. People who are higher at risk have died from this virus. But we also have to understand there's a much bigger picture involved, and we have to be able to open up our economy as safely as possible to get people back to work, get kids back in the classroom. That's why I've been so encouraged by the leadership of Craig Bourne and others here in the area who took it upon themselves from April, from the time they opened the doors back up, to ensure that kids can be back in the classroom to do it safely. So that way moms and dads can get back to work. There's not that uncertainty, and they built in those contingency plans. So I think that's the biggest takeaway of what we've learned in recent months, is that while there is a virus, we have to deal with that. We also have to ensure that when we get out of this, we have an economy to get back to. And that's been probably our main focus over these last several months, and trying to work with this administration as best as we can, work with our federal delegation, our federal partners, to ensure that we can do just that and get Wisconsinites back to work.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. We're also pleased this morning to have State Representative Nancy VanderMeer. She represents District 70. And I always applaud her for coming because she gets to drive through deer country, both in the spring and in the fall. So Nancy, what we'd like, if you could just give us a little bit of your background. We're going to speak from the podium just so the virtual and kind of the issues, but we also have a question that was, that you speak to a lot, so the people are interested in a couple of the bills that you authored. One is the regarding opportunity zones, and the other one, of course, is the paper industry one on chemical recovery boilers. So if you could speak to that too. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you and good morning. Usually a very beautiful fall day when I drive up today, but it seems like we took a turn into winter. But anyway, thank you for joining us today. And just a few remarks about my background. I'm a former small business person. I'm part of a family dairy farm in Toma, 5th generation, and that's on my husband's side, of course. I also chair the Rural Development Committee, and one of the 4 areas of policy that we really like to focus on in that is K-12 education, workforce development, healthcare, and technology, including broadband. And I'm happy to say that this last session, we worked on issues relating to all of that, shepherding bills through our committee regarding that, getting them to the assembly floor for passage. And some of the work that I have done as far as policy, including a couple of the items that I will speak to in a couple of moments, is I have worked diligently on access to healthcare. And so that has taken a couple different forms as well. So just a little bit of background on my part. The 2 items that I want to bring to your attention regarding number 1, the Opportunity Zone bill that I had authored this last session. And of course it had passed through the legislature and it was signed into law. And usually when I talk about opportunity zones, I ask people, how many of you are familiar with them? Very good, thank you. And for those of you that are not familiar with opportunity zones, they were developed in the federal Jobs and Tax Bill in 2017. And what they are low-income census tracts that are challenged financially for economic development. So it can be for workforce housing, business, it can be for business facilities or for stock in a business that is developing. And one of the challenges that many of you are aware of in business, if you are trying to start something in a blighted area, access to capital can be quite challenging. So what this bill does federally is bring together those people who want to be investors in those areas and bring together those entrepreneurs who want to start businesses in those areas. And they do that by utilizing tax discounts or on capital gains. And those capital gains are from those investors and they can invest in those areas. And those opportunity zones, they exist throughout the United States. Here in Wisconsin, we have 120 opportunity zones in 44 counties. They include urban, rural, and tribal areas as well. So it's quite diverse, and that's why I was excited. The problem is by having that tax advantage for our Wisconsinites with those capital gains to get them to reinvest, how do we get them to keep it here in Wisconsin? So what we did in our opportunity zones were to double that, to keep that investment here in Wisconsin. So I appreciate you allowing me to explain some of that, the technicalities of that. And the great thing about this bill that got signed into law, of course, was we have a zone near Wisconsin Rapids, near Marshfield, near La Crosse, but also Racine and Milwaukee as well. So we had a broad coalition of diverse interests in this bill. So I was very happy to bring that to the Wisconsinites. And so I look forward to a lot of entrepreneurial success in that particular area. The second bill that I want to talk about is the chemical recovery boiler bill. And as I say, some of the work that we do in the legislature sometimes can be technical. But basically, the chemical recovery boiler bill is very significant to our paper industry here in Wisconsin. And as all of you know, the paper industry is a legacy industry. That's what I call it, very important. 32,000 people in Wisconsin work in the paper industry. So after working with our professionals and for example, with Domtar and 5 of the unions that work within the paper industry, and examining the annual inspection procedure that is required by the state law for the chemical recovery boilers, we found that if a plant could pass a rigorous inspection standard by their insurance company, that they could go every other year. And I know when I explain that, that doesn't maybe sound that significant, but to a paper plant, a paper manufacturer, that could literally mean up to millions of dollars in savings per year. So that was something that we put into law, and I'm very happy to report that it was a very sensible regulation and continuing to hold the paper industry to a very high standard. And so therefore, I certainly hope, as I said, that we continue to not incur those burdensome regulations on our manufacturers here in Wisconsin. And that's, of course, just an example of that. So once again, thank you. And I'll turn the mic back over.
I'm sorry, I went the opposite direction.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative VanderMeer. I'm gonna stop for 1 second. Angel, do you have any online?
I do. So this is for all the legislators. Can you speak to our divided government regarding the disputes and the different Democratic executive branches, Republican legislative branch, and how they hope to create progress? What is hopeful and what is not hopeful?
Just to make sure everyone heard that, the question was about divided government. Obviously in Wisconsin, we have a Democratic governor and the legislature is controlled by Republicans, and just kind of, I think that when I'm reading into it, it's kind of like how can they work together to move the state forward. We have 3 people really interested in
Yeah, we're all fighting there.
speaking to that, so we'll start on the Senate side.
All right, perfect. Well, no, that's a great question. It's obviously, in my first session, I've kind of seen it all now. My first legislative session, we had Governor Walker, Republican controlled both houses in the legislature. Then after the 2018 elections, it was going to be a brave new world and divided government. And so I think for many of my colleagues, myself included, it's just trying to navigate those waters. And I'll be the first to admit that the relationship between the legislature and the executive branch didn't exactly start off on the smoothest of feet when, after the extraordinary session in December of 2018, and unfortunately things just haven't gotten that much better in recent months, and especially in the wake of COVID-19, and that's been a challenge, and no question of frustration for a lot of people as you see headline after headline about the fights that go on, whether it's court legal battles or what have you, and the dust-ups that we've seen in the press. And so what I've been trying to encourage leadership, at least in my house, is that regardless of what happens in the past, we have to be able to rebuild those bridges and extend the olive branch to work with this administration on a whole host of things. I mean, clearly right now COVID-19 is at the forefront, but there's still a number of other issues out there that have to be addressed that we will at some point need the governor's signature on to get turned into law. I take a look at a number of the bills that the Assembly had put into the Senate chambers, about 150 great bipartisan bills that we were set to take up, dealing from elder abuse task force bills to water task force bills that we were going to take up, but because of COVID-19, the Senate was able to do so. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get those across the finish line if the Senate decides to convene after the election, which I am fighting tooth and nail for. But that's the other thing too, that while we have these dust-ups, there's a lot that doesn't get discussed that happens on down in Madison. I think there's this perception that when we walk into the building, Republicans and Democrats, We're giving our red boxing gloves, the Democrats are giving their blue boxing gloves, and then we just beat the tar out of each other. But even despite the flare-ups and the dust-ups, in this legislative session alone, over 90% of the bills that were signed into law had bipartisan support. I can tell you of the nearly 50 bills that I've had signed into law in my first term, all of them that got signed into law had bipartisan support. So by and large, there's a lot of collegiality down in the legislature. There is conversations with the governor's administration, but we do have to do a better job moving forward, and I'm hoping that once the dust settles, regardless of what happens on November 3rd, that we kind of put back on our governing caps and put forward policies that are going to be in the best interest for the people we represent.
Yeah, sorry, Craig, we're just
Go
you just sit down, we're good. I wanted to jump up too because this is one of the things that people have to understand, that newspapers need to make money, right? And Senator Testin said it, I think it was 94% even this session of the bills that we passed are bipartisan bills. I mean, so yes, the legislative leaders and the governor, they all want to get headlines. They all want to be the first to call Journal Sentinel or the AP or Wiz Politics and say, well, those you-know-whats did this. And so behind the scenes, the rest of us that aren't at the top in the Assembly or the Senate or in the executive branch, we're all working together. I can tell you that Representative Shanklin, Senator Testin, Nancy VanderMeer, and I, we work together really well. I mean, just yesterday I had a good phone call with WDC Secretary Missy Hughes on the Verso situation. I talked with the administration, weekly, and we're doing these conversations to take care of all of these other things that the headline grabbers aren't really necessarily taking care of right now. So I think that's one of the things in the 10 years that I've been around that people ask all the time is, why don't you guys get along better? There are so many of us that get along so well that I think the bigger fights in our caucus, at least, are not, Republican, Democrat, it's urban versus rural. Those are the things that matter the most in our caucus, are those conversations. We have a caucus almost every week. We're all 63 of us in the Assembly, in the Assembly Republican caucus. Get together, we air our grievances, we fight with each other, we don't all agree on everything in our caucuses. They get a little contentious sometimes, don't they, Nancy? We give them our input, and the one thing that I love the most about the way our caucus is set up right now, that gives us the power to kind of look beyond all that contention, is that there are a good 18 to 20 of us in this western central Wisconsin corridor that are rural Republican legislators in our caucus that really drive that conversation to get results for our rural areas, and those are the things that matter the most. So when Senator Testin and his 50 bills get done, we're on those bills too. I mean, that's our side of it in the Assembly, is we're writing those bills to make sure that we're doing the small things for the paper industry. The Chemical Recovery Boiler Act to save millions of dollars for our companies. To fight off bills that would hurt our companies environmentally and cost them millions and millions and millions of dollars, but not move the needle environmentally. We heard a lot about that last night in the debate too, is we got to be smart about those things and that balance. So we take those bills seriously. We make sure that they represent the views of central Wisconsin, get them through the legislature, we get them on the governor's desk, and every time, the governor's pen's hitting them. So those are the things that matters the most. So I appreciate the question. It's a great question because it's one of the things that we hear about a lot. Representative VanderMeer. Sorry, Greg, you're out of this.
Okay, I'll take a nap back there.
Thank you, Representative. Both of my colleagues have said so much, and they both had mentioned that in the last session, over 90% of the legislation was bipartisan. But I have to say this, I was inaugurated in 2015, and every session since then that I have been involved with has seen that bipartisan activity. And when I talk to you about the areas that I am interested in working with, it's because it helps to lift up all Wisconsinites. And I talked about the Opportunity Zones bill, and of course the Chemical Recovery Boiler bill. That was a bill, both of those for example, those were bills where we saw great bipartisan support and interest in getting them over the finish line and into law. And so, those are a couple of examples, but I've also participated on the Speaker's Task Force for Suicide Prevention. And that was another task force where I saw the interest and momentum of both sides of the aisle. So we concur on a lot of areas of policy and how we can just serve Wisconsinites better, especially in central Wisconsin. And I think the process for us to do that is there, and we need to continue to do that. So I look forward to the next session and continuing to serve well. Thank you.
And Nancy, did you want to speak anything more about your healthcare initiative?
Oh,
type thing?
certainly.
Just introduce it to, because that's one of the questions we received too, was on healthcare and things.
To give you an idea of some of the healthcare policy that I had authored, I had indicated back in 2015 when I started, I had authored the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact. Some of you may be familiar with it. And I think compacts are, number one, a good way for us to create more opportunity to get those well-trained professionals from a lot of different areas in our workforce into Wisconsin, okay? But number two, and my high priority, is creating that additional access for our citizens. So in 2015, I authored the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact, which created a clearinghouse of physician credentials. And as I said, with my other two bills I talked about, sometimes our work is rather technical in nature. But I had served on my hospital board in Toma, and had been a tremendous opportunity for me because I could bring that experience into the work for the people of Wisconsin. And in 2015, as I said, we created this clearinghouse of credentialing of physicians. And this is important because in the past, it could take maybe a couple months for a physician to transfer their license into Wisconsin. What we did by creating that clearinghouse with other member states, so we had to come together with a minimum of over 17 states to start the compact. So we had to, of course, vote that into law here in our state. And we talked about the bipartisan issue. And I gotta share this with you. That, of course, had great bipartisan support, passed on the floor. I think I only had one dissenting vote when it came across the floor in the assembly. But there were some folks, even on my side of the aisle during the committee process, because it was a new idea, that had reservations about it. So although we passed it into law in 2015 and became a member of the compact, got a seat at the table as we started the compact, what we saw was that it was quite successful. Instead of taking months for physicians to have their licenses transferred into Wisconsin, it was taking weeks because of the efficiency created. It's voluntary for them to use that process, but it, as I said, creates that sense of efficiency without sidestepping any of our rigorous medical practice laws here in the state as well. So when we originally put the bill into law, there was a sunset clause on it because those who had reservations in our legislative body said, let's review this to make sure that it's working for Wisconsin. If not, we'll terminate our membership in the compact. So I'm happy to report, yes, Wisconsin had the first license go through of any of the states. And in our last count last year, we had over 400 licenses get transferred through that process. So that created efficiency, and those physicians were able to, of course, practice here in Wisconsin. What really makes a difference is how it's used in telemedicine. And telemedicine, of course, was one of the ways that healthcare was being delivered, of course, now during the pandemic. So I was very happy to be part of that legislation. And as I said, this year we had removed the sunset clause, so it became a permanent part of our Wisconsin law. Secondly, I want to mention another area that I had authored a bill was removing a bottleneck for the actual practicum experience for physical therapy students. And that was a need that we found through some of our work with our technical colleges, Western Technical and La Crosse. So we were able to work with them and remove that so we get those students into their professional locations and being able to treat patients and help them to move on and have the best quality healthcare possible in our area. and have the access most quickly as needed. So both of those give you an idea of some of the work that I enjoy doing to help lift up all the people here in Wisconsin. And I do want to add this, we are very fortunate in our area, this part of the state, to have access to excellent health care as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We do have other questions, but I wanted to make sure folks that are live in the audience, any questions you would like me to direct to our legislators at this point?
I have some virtual ones.
Okay, seeing none here, and then if you have a virtual one, go right ahead.
So we're gonna go back to COVID-19 as that's obviously a very hot topic right now. So the first question is, what is the stance from the legislators on the importance of wearing masks as the upward trends, of the new COVID-19 cases continue in the state of Wisconsin?
Okay, so the question is on COVID-19, and it's specifically about masking as the trends continue to rise in the state. Would you like to start with that one?
Thank you. Thank you for the question, and very appropriate. I think that it's important, you saw me when I walked in. I had my mask on, and I think it's important that we protect ourselves and respect those that we are involved with. I make a regular practice of trying to utilize it and where it is expected to be worn as well. So it's something that can be used in combination with, of course, we hear the simple things like washing your hands, social distancing, and just really, I think, taking good care of yourself as well. So I'll leave it and add that.
Yeah, the answer is the same. When the guidelines are wear your mask, social distance, wash your hands, take care of yourself, those are things we're doing on a daily basis. I've got my cadre of masks, and Dean's been great at helping, trying to push those on everybody and making sure they got the right style. And I see Angel's got the one that Dean had given us at Rotary, and I've got my Badgers one, and I've got some from Aspirus, and I've got you should see my car. We're loaded with face masks and gaiters and everything else. And one of the important aspects of that is, yes, I wear them, yes, we do that. We make sure that we are taking care and following the CDC guidelines and telling people about that on social media. And I've been very apparent on social media that I wear it. And the people that are critical about it, let them be critical. It doesn't matter to me if they're critical about it. It's something we have to do. So even, a good aspect of it, just to kind of give you a little more background on it, is during campaign season. It's a new dynamic, right? Door knocking is always one of those big things. And we've been told, try to maintain social distance and do all those things. Well, we still have to be able to get our message out to people. So the door knocking, when we go door to door, our campaigns haven't stopped. We try to make sure we do it appropriately. So we wear our neck gaiters, we wear our face masks. We'll go up to the door, we'll knock, and this extra step, we're taking 8 feet back, so somebody can answer the door. When they answer the door, we'll have the conversation from behind the door or from 8 to 10 feet in person. To make sure that as we leave something with them later, that we've talked to them socially distanced and safe. So that's one of the things that people give this bad connotation to, is that we're not following those guidelines, but we're doing it every single day, every single place we go. We tell people the same thing every time too. They've got to wear them. Senator Testin and I are sitting together here for breakfast this morning. I think we see each other more in our lives, so I think we're almost family at this point, so we're okay, I think. But it is important. I think people have that misinterpretation of where we're at with that, as we follow those guidelines and we promote them.
Yeah, there's not much to add more than what Representative VanderMeer and Representative Krug had mentioned. I will say this, people are probably wondering, well, you guys are up here on camera, not wear a mask, but per the governor's emergency order and executive order, when we're doing political speeches and things of that nature, it's okay. But no, we've been telling everyone. Especially as we've seen a rise in cases here in the state, the surge this fall. Socially distance, use best practices, good hygiene, wash your hands, wear a mask when in public, and that'll go a long way. And so, the other component of that is we have to be smart about this. I think one of the reasons why we're in the situation that we're in right now is that some folks let their guard down. I think there's a lot of COVID fatigue out there where for months now, people are just tired and they're just hungry to get back to some sense of normalcy. And I think as a result of that, we took things for granted because for months our rate was relatively low, hospitalization rate was relatively low, but we're in a little bit of a different environment now. So we've got to take some extra precautions, be safe out there, and hopefully we'll get through this sooner rather than later.
Thank you very much, and I know, speaking to Angel, I know we have a related COVID-19 question, and I'm gonna, if you can just kind of highlight it again for me, please.
Sure. The courts have temporarily enjoined the executive branch from publishing a list of businesses that have had 2 or more positive COVID tests. What do you see the eventual outcome of this?
Again, it talks about the possibility of publishing the names of businesses or organizations that have had or will have 2 or more positive COVID tests, and that's in the courts, and there's a stay on that. Would anybody like to speak to that? You jumped up right away.
Absolutely.
We're thumb wrestling over who was gonna get that one.
So that is a great question. When news broke that the administration was considering releasing the list of all the businesses here in the state that have had 1 or more COVID cases, the red flags went up immediately. Our small businesses have been dying on the vine since this pandemic hit. And they're just trying to get by. They're trying to open up their doors, get back to work, open up safely. And this notion that they would then essentially be doxxed because of some cases, that's concerning. Because that's going to give the impression to business owners and the community at large that it's not safe to go in there. Yet the laws of probability would show you that any big box store throughout this entire time, I would be willing to bet 100% that someone at some point in time was either infected with COVID or was through that store with COVID, but yet they've been able to keep their doors open. So our hope is, and I can't speak for my colleagues, but I think they share the same sentiment, that we would hope that any attempt to release the names of those businesses would be hindered by the courts. And I fully support it. This is not a time, because one of the issues too with that is that there was no time window or parameter set. I mean, when did those cases have to occur? Was it throughout the entire duration of this pandemic? Was it within a few weeks of within a few weeks of each other? There was no set clarity or guidelines on what was going to be done as it relates to releasing those names. So I think the court got it right in holding back and withholding those names, and I hope they continue to uphold that order because it is certainly detrimental to businesses as they try and recover from this.
Scott or Nancy, do you want to?
Kind of the same,
Okay.
really, yeah.
Good, okay. Let the record show we have a ditto, right? Okay. Again, any question? Yes, we do. Got a couple out there, but Bill, your hand, you beat Craig by about a half a second.
Yeah, I
so-
saw it, it was quick,
Yeah.
it's quick.
I think now that, in my opinion, the number one issue is, and I'm wondering if state legislators have anything to do with this and rectifying it, is the fact that our state prisons are overflowed with COVID, and is that only up to the governor to release those, or could the legislators get together and compromise something about, people that are in the state prisons?
The question is on COVID-19, and we've seen quite an increase in the state prisons, and Bill's question is that a decision a governor can make, or can the legislature make that? And I don't know if we have.
Sure.
Scott, you want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, I've served on the Corrections and Public Safety and Criminal Justice Committees the last 8 years, and I think that's one of the issues we talked about early on is about COVID and the impact in our prison systems. It's one of the things we have done, dating back to the extraordinary session when people said we did all of these nefarious things. One of the things we did was we recognize that the governor has the ability to make those pardons and to make sure that he can make an executive decision on individuals inside the prison system. We knew that as he was going to go through that, and he's done, I think, 74 pardons at this point. One of the things we did in that bill was to make sure if he's going to do that we simply get a list of who it is. That we can just maybe know exactly who's coming out, why they're coming out, and where they're going. One of the things that Senator Testin and I have worked on for the last, the whole 4 years that you've been there, is the sexually violent predators bill to make sure that of those individuals that are placed in, Sand Ridge, if there's got to be a release from Sand Ridge, we want to make sure that those people are being released in their own communities instead of Milwaukee individuals being placed into central Wisconsin. So that's all we've asked of the governor, is that he can make those decisions. And I would encourage us in the legislature to address that further too, to make sure that we've got those extra capacity issues, like I talked about before for our hospitals. We need to do that for the prison system and for our jails, to have safe places for those individuals to go instead of being crammed in. So that's a twofold.
Ask a follow-up on that.
Yes, go right ahead.
So, my thought is, it's a lot easier to call your representative, but is that available to people that have loved ones in prison and for, other than sexual predators and things like that?
Yeah.
Is it possible to call you, or do they have to contact the governor's office because that's only?
That's a great question. Follow-up just for people online and otherwise, was the follow-up was how does that process work? Can you call your legislator to start that appeal to have that release for that part? And then that's one of the things that we've worked through now, is that there is a process. So it would start with your legislator, or you can go to the governor's office. It's easier to go to your legislative office and say, here's the issue. We get these emails all the time. It's one of the things that have come up in my office, is we get those emails and people want us to release those. And I don't like releasing those sensitive emails like that, but we get those stories. And people say, my son or my nephew is in this situation. We get those handwritten letters. They're 4 or 5 pages long sometimes, even saying, hey, we really need you to do something. We forward those on. So everything that comes through our legislative office goes to the governor. There is actually a form from the governor's office that they ask to be completed. So there is a process. I think it's easier to start with the legislative office to do that, though. But yeah, that's the point, is as COVID expands and we see this moving forward, we've got to figure out a way to have that capacity built in. You can't just keep people crowded up in prisons like that. We're over capacity in some of our prisons already. To have overcapacity when you're trying to socially distance during the pandemic it's a recipe for disaster. So that overflow capacity is something we haven't addressed, and that's something that has to be addressed pretty quick. So if that answers.
Thank you. Now, Craig, you had a question too?
Now, I wanted to steer back to the first question that was asked, which, and this is not to discredit you necessarily, but I didn't hear the specific answer to what are your feelings, your personal feelings about how we as a state have handled the pandemic. I'd like to know that as a taxpayer, and I think other taxpayers want to know that as well. That ties together because I have some questions around leadership in the face of the pandemic in the state of Wisconsin, nationally as well. But my question would be, and your answers are intermixed into all of the things we've discussed. Masks, physical distancing, hospital infrastructure, reopening of businesses, and so forth and so on. And my question is, are we really where we need to be, right? And I don't want to go too deep into what my personal thoughts and attitudes are around where we are and where we could be, because I think it's quite clear the answer is much more nuanced than stay home with the sheets over your head for the next 9 months, or open wide up and pretend like it doesn't exist, right? So my question is really around your personal feelings about how the pandemic was handled, and whether or not there can be more unilateral, cohesive leadership as a state to handle something like this if it were to happen again in the future, or even moving forward.
So your personal, would you like to tackle that?
So one of the things that I pointed out early on in that response is I think we can do more, and I think we should have done more, and I think that's something that we were pretty apparent on from our answers earlier, is that there are things that we could have done better in an unprecedented situation. We don't know everything that's going to come up even still. We need to do more. We need to make sure that all of the dollars that we've drawn down from the federal government that are sitting in the governor's office right now are actually getting spent. And when Senator Testin comes up to answer this question, he can tell you more about how much money was set aside for our surge that was lapsed. Like 64% of it was sitting there that hasn't been spent yet. That's what really angers me, is that we have done everything we could have at the beginning of this to say, here's what we need to do to respond to the situation. And the response has been tepid at best. So the legislature needs to be back in session as soon as possible after this election is over November 3rd, the week after, to make sure that those dollars are ready in 2021 for new spending. At the same time that we keep pushing the governor's office to spend the $2 billion we already brought forward. When we look at the Wisconsin Hospital Association stats every day at 3 o'clock every afternoon after we get the DHS update, to kind of merge those two things together. Our hospitals are in a bad spot for critical access space. They don't have the room for those people. That hurts me personally to know that we don't have all the room that we need. But it also shows me that every day when they say how many hospitals are short on hospital gowns, PPEs, N95 masks, and other personal things like that, and gloves and sanitation devices, the number is either 0 or 1. So I know they have the supplies. We know that they need the space. We have to make sure that places like Aspires here in Wisconsin Rapids is not being overflown, and it's not. We have those communications. So yeah, I desperately want us to be in a session and do more, but I desperately also want the governor to spend the money we've already given him. And that's one of the things that is really upsetting right now. As we talk about these things about responses for the legislature and what we should do. We did it in April. It's still not being implemented. And people say, do more, do more, do more. What? What do we do more of?
Is the $2 billion part of the CARES Act dollars, or is that?
Those are the CARES Act dollars that we had to federally, that we had to approve in the state to bring down from the CARES Act, right?
That was my impression, so
Yeah.
that answers that question, but I guess the broader question is around messaging and expectation, right? And I haven't heard, from my perspective, cohesive messaging from our government, our state government. I don't know that the legislature has taken a position on listening to the opinions of our physicians and the medical community around stemming a pandemic.
Right.
I don't know that it's technically my responsibility as a school superintendent to develop a coalition of local medical professionals donating their time to our organization to figure out how we can open our schools safely. Now, I don't need the government or the state to dictate how that happens, but some support in that regard would have been welcomed by any human being in the state of Wisconsin. And my concern comes from there still doesn't seem to be cohesive messaging from our state around these are the things we need to do so businesses can be open.
Right.
And
I
kids
would
can
love
be in
cohesive
school.
messaging. And cohesive messaging is something in split government that I don't think anybody in the country is seeing anywhere. I mean, we've got states that are controlled by one party that don't have cohesive messaging. There's not a cohesive message on COVID. We're doing everything we can to figure out as we go, local area by local area. And that's what I gave you credit for originally, and to give Troy and the school board credit for originally, is to pulling together those coalitions. Those are the things that we've been asked to be able to give as the power back to the local communities to make those decisions. And now that the power's back in the local communities to make those decisions, you're doing the right thing. You're making it work. You're doing everything you possibly can to make the situation as best you possibly can. Same as us to try to deliver from a state aspect where basically the legislature only has control of the purse. We've given the funds to do everything that we possibly can. I can't dictate to you what your response to COVID is going to be. That's going to work in Wisconsin Rapids. That absolutely is not going to work in Green Bay or La Crosse or Milwaukee or Madison. What works in Wisconsin Rapids works in Wisconsin Rapids, and you're doing an amazing job with it, Craig. So I appreciate the heck out of that.
And I don't want to devalue anything that we've done here locally. And I echo the sentiment around allowing us some authority to manage and mitigate and do what we think is necessary. I guess my broader point is the legislature is absolutely in charge of dollars and cents, but you're also leaders, de facto leaders when you're elected to public office, correct?
Right, absolutely, and that's
And
why
I
we've
think
been...
that there hasn't been, and it stuns me, and I understand on the federal level, if we want to talk about it on the federal level, it's a whole different ball of wax of which we have less and less control. But again, this idea around cohesive leadership stems from a stating an overarching goal, correct? And then identifying mechanisms by which you're going to make incremental progress. That has nothing to do with spending dollars, in my opinion, right? And it's similar to if we state what our goal is as an organization, and then we spend dollars contrary to that, as an example, that's how the dollars can tie into that we're not working towards our goal, in my opinion. And I'm just saying this idea of, you know, that's probably where you're getting the heat from as legislators, because there doesn't seem to be a cohesive sentiment, because there should be, in my opinion, this is personal opinion, around here's what we do and here's how we get there, right? And we tickle at it, but it's been partisan finger pointing, and that's what's terrifying about this circumstance. And I don't know, sitting here now, that if this happens 5 years from now, we're going to be positioned any better to deal with it. These are the concerns that I have as a human being responsible for 5,000 kids and 800 staff members.
No, I totally get that, and I think one of the things that we've taken on early on in the COVID situation is dealing with those things case by case. And that's one of the struggles that we have, is that as we deal with early on with the public health department trying to shut down Verso because they weren't essential, and defining who's essential and what's not essential, to have a cohesive message around trying to save manufacturers at the same time we're trying to keep schools open, at the same time we're trying to keep hospitals supplied. Have a cohesive message is tough when you're bombarded with every single thing every single day. So we're dealing with it case by case and giving you the authority to make your decisions. And that's the best that we can absolutely do in this. It's unprecedented. We don't have a playbook. We're trying to develop a playbook to move forward. So I can tell you in 5 years, the response is going to be different. I mean, that's plain fact. I mean, we're going to be able to go back into our state budget process and say, hey, we didn't even think about these things possibly happening. We've got to make sure that we develop this better. One of the other things we got to develop better is the powers and the delegations over emergency declarations and figuring out what is appropriate, how long is appropriate, delineating that and working through that process. Because as we've seen it work through, there's been so many kinks in that process. We don't know who's supposed to do what and for how long. And that's where legislative leaders and other legislators that argue with the governor to slow the response because they don't know who should have the power and who shouldn't have the power. So yeah, I get it, man. We're there too, right in the same boat with you. I get the frustration. We're dealing with it every single day too, and we're getting our brains kicked in on every side too to try to figure out the best way to lead. And the best way that I can lead locally is to keep having that open line of communication with everybody who absolutely wants it or needs it, who have asked for it. And that's what we've tried to do. And I'll let others weigh in instead of stealing the entire show, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, Craig, I appreciate your question there. And so maybe we should take a little time trip back to April when the legislature convened and passed legislation to leverage the nearly $2 billion in the CARES Act that was given to the Evers administration, which they doled out through the administration in a number of different departments, different programs, dealing with things like parental assistance, small business loans. One of the things, though, that as things have progressed and it's been increasingly frustrating for us in the legislature is that, we provided those funds for the administration, but now, there was $445 million set aside of that $2 billion for a surge fund for the situation that we are in right now. And then we come to find out this week, news broke on Tuesday, that fund was slashed for 64%, by 64%. That money was supposed to go towards our hospitals to deal with the situation that we are in right now. The fact that we still have roughly 80,000 Wisconsinites that have yet to receive an unemployment check. 80,000 Wisconsinites. Can anyone in this room or anyone online honestly say they could be able to survive financially for almost half a year with no income because they've been out of work, their business has been shut down? I don't know a single person. And on top of that, there was an audit a couple weeks ago. So in response to the massive surge of calls into DWD, DWD decided that they were going to hire these call centers to take in these extra calls. Many of us in the legislature right away raised concerns saying that's probably not the best idea. You should probably reverse course, transfer employees to the Department of Workforce Development, because our concern was that we are going to have individuals fielding calls from people who are out of work, who have questions about unemployment, talking to individuals who may not necessarily know our unemployment process, to then pass those calls on to an adjudicator. Well, the Audit Bureau came out, and during the economic shutdown, 41 million calls were fielded into these call centers. We're a population of 5.5 million. 41 calls. 93% of those phone calls received a busy signal. Another 6% of those phone calls just gave up. Less than 1% actually got through to an adjudicator. Less than 1% out of 41 million calls. There's no question that we can do better. And going back to some of the previous statements and conversations that we've had, that's why we need to rebuild that relationship between the legislature and the administration. The well's toxic right now. And there's plenty of blame to go on both sides. But as Representative Krug mentioned, there are some things that we would like to get done. As I've been pleading with my leadership, look, we need to be flexible, we need to be nimble. We also have to understand that unlike the federal government, we don't have the ability to print money. And we're already facing anywhere between $1 billion to $1 billion shortfall going into this next biennium. We're going to have to make very difficult decisions. That's why we have been pleading and urging our congressional delegation, for the love of God, please come together and provide another economic relief package so we can provide relief for the people that we need. And that's why even last night we were at an event talking with Mike Collin, one of Senator Johnson's aides, I kept asking, like, what's the status? Where are we at? I'm like, we have people out there who are hurting extremely right now. And we need to be able to be responsive with whatever the feds come down with, So that way we, as a state, can come in as a legislature with the executive branch, do whatever needs to be done to provide those resources to people that need it right now. So I get it, it's frustrating, there's no question going into this next session and when we get out of this pandemic, there are going to have to be serious conversations to make sure that we are in a better position for the next time this comes up. There's no question about that. And as always, Craig, my door remains open to any ideas and conversation that we can take a look at. So, I'm looking forward to working with you and hopefully can come up with some ideas. So if for some reason we are in this situation 5 years from now, we're in a much better position to handle it.
Did you want to comment, or are you good?
I'll just mention.
Sure.
Thank you. Both of my colleagues had mentioned so much about the response, but I do want to mention, kind of bringing it more close to home, of course, there was a plan that the legislature had, and that was probably, I'm going to say July, where we had the business plan. And that was a very granular plan that actually calculated into an algorithm a number of different factors within each county. It was the rate of infection, number of openings in hospitals, available PPE, and then of course the type of business that was being executed in that particular location. So that data was put together, put it together in an algorithm, and then that scoring would be placed on that business. And it would be reevaluated periodically, and I think the proposal was every 10 days to 2 weeks. So we would be able to communicate to those in our communities that scoring on those particular businesses. And I think that could be moved into other aspects of the community as well. And that's giving that information real time to people. And they can decide too that this, the level of safety it is for them in those businesses. It would also bring about an awareness of what type of remediation needs to take place in that particular venue or business. Social distancing, mask wearing, etc. So that was an opportunity, that was a plan that we had put forward, and I thought it was very comprehensive, and that was the type of thing that I was looking forward to be able to bring it close to home for people. So thank you, that's a very good question.
Thank you.
Thank you, and a couple other questions that came in. One, I'm just gonna, you can just talk, Senator Testin, the question, obviously you mentioned lots of bills, and we had a question from the paper industry about the chemical recovery boiler that Representative VanderMeer and you spoke about, and their obvious question is, have you heard anything about the Senate going back in session? I know you were talking possibly after the election, but is there an update that we could give them? They're just interested in that part. That and other bills, obviously.
No, that's a great question. So as I mentioned earlier on the Assembly's last day, which was what, mid-February?
Yeah, so it seems like a year ago.
I know, it seems like ages ago. I think we're on year 5 of the year 2020. So they passed about 150 bills, a number of them that I'd authored, including the chemical recovery bill that Representative VanderMeer had highlighted so eloquently, and environmentally friendly. It's pro-business, pro-environment, great bipartisan support. Is going to be very helpful for our paper industry right here in central Wisconsin. So we were set to take up these bills. The Senate was going to come in mid-March, but then just like that, COVID hit and everything was shut down. So I do believe there's a possibility that the Senate will convene after the election. I have been encouraged in my leadership day in and day out. I remember earlier this summer, I actually sent a letter to President Roth and Senator Fitzgerald, begging them for a special session on some of the water quality bills that we had worked on through the Speaker's Task Force on Water Quality. Lots of good, common sense, bipartisan legislation that doesn't cost the state a single dime, that all we need to do is come in, convene. We can even do it virtually. The Senate, we did something for the first time in state Senate history back in April when we passed the COVID relief bill. We met via Zoom. It was certainly unique, so we do have that infrastructure set up that we could easily convene after the election, especially since we're probably not going to be out of the woods yet with COVID-19, that hopefully we can get those bills across the finish line onto the governor's desk and signed into law before the new legislature convenes in January 2021. If for some reason those bills do not cross the finish line before January 2021, you have my full commitment that we will get those bills dropped right away in the start of the new legislative session. We'd have to go through the whole process again of getting them through committees in both the Senate and the Assembly, as well as both houses, but given the fact these bills saw nearly unanimous support in the Assembly, I don't think it would be too difficult to get them through if we had to start the process over again. But we're hoping we don't have to go that route, hoping to get these done by the end of this year, and we'll keep pushing leadership in the Senate to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Also, we had a question talking about the budget, the next budget process that's going to start right away in January timeframe. And the question was priorities, and I'll ask each of you to address it. And Nancy, if you'd like to start on priority, if you would be able to address priorities that you would have in the budget, what would you like to include? And I can't guarantee you'll get all this.
I think we'd all agree on what the priorities are. It's going to be healthcare, and the public health aspect of communicating the safety of our situation to our citizens as well. And of course, my usual ones. I have been a proponent of education and proper education funding. And of course, our infrastructure, our broadband, our roads, and continue on that path. And so basically, those are rather broad categories, but those are the areas that I'm continuing to look forward to. And if I even drill down a little bit more into healthcare, one of the aspects that I have supported, because I really understand this particular issue, is disproportionate healthcare funding for our critical access hospitals. And that is very important right now. When we saw the essential services that were being limited in our hospitals during the beginning phases of the pandemic, that was a tremendous stressor on our hospitals financially. So for me, that will be something that I will be very, very intense at looking at funding that further. And I have supported that particular aspect since I began in the Assembly. Other areas, of course, will be mental health funding, programming, especially in our rural areas where we have a shortage of mental health care practitioners. How do we get that information to our counties? I belong to a mental health coalition in Monroe County, and programming is one of the issues. How do we get that information out to the people that we serve? And in fact, I had written a bill that came out of the Speaker's Task Force on Suicide Prevention. And that was grant programs to get those fundings into the communities so that coalitions like that I'm associated with can get the information to those that need it. So that's just a few of my ideas, and I appreciate the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative VanderMeer. One of the things that I think I've excelled at in the last few state budget processes is local projects. And I'm still going to fight for more funding for our local projects and bringing attention to central Wisconsin through the state budget process. People think, when you hear in the headlines there's a big fight between the governor's office and the legislature. I don't think anybody remembers our last state budget process. That was pretty quick and quiet and painless, wasn't it? Yeah, it's literally 75% of what the legislature does is put into that state budget process. For us this last session, we were very fortunate that we had a very good state budget process where we got it through the legislature rather smoothly for once. It didn't have to hang out there. And the governor signed it like 3 days later with very few vetoes. It's one of the things that people have forgotten because it does seem like a lifetime ago because of COVID. But things in the last state budgets that have been very impactful for central Wisconsin have been able to accomplish. Local projects, Alexander Field, building that up to make sure that we can pull in the business that needs to come in from all around the country, whether it's Sand Valley or other manufacturers bringing in jets and folks and everything else to that process. Building up the UW system with a new science chem building at UWSP, making sure that Skyward is able to stay in central Wisconsin, making sure that we've got so many things going on here as far as road construction projects getting done. You've seen from almost the edge of Wisconsin Rapids all the way through Adams County, the Highway 13's been done. Now it's time to bring those state budget dollars in to finish 8th Street and to get that back up and going. We've been fighting for 8th Street repairs for the last 4 state budgets. It's time to get that done right now, because when you drive up and down State Street, wow, that is tough. I give Shane and our city council all the credit in the world for trying to go through that patchwork to get that thing to be usable. But it's time that those dollars in the state budget come back for 8th Street repairs, and those are things we fight for. State budget is always a big boxing match, right? You got legislators fighting for their priorities. Some of us kind of stay back on the ropes a little bit, and then you look for your opportunities and you get those projects into the state budget, and that's exactly how we've been able to accomplish those things for central Wisconsin. It's kind of hanging back on the ropes, let the big guys fight it out, knock each other out, and you sneak in, you get your priorities in. Those are the things that you got to have that finesse in, and that ability to politic a little bit to make sure that your priorities are met in the state budget. Education has always been one of my key ideas and key priorities. Knowing that the state funding formula isn't the best, and that we're probably never going to see a coalition of people coming together to change the funding formula, but also recognizing that our smaller schools need more categorical aids and making sure that those dollars are coming to them. Instead of throwing them right into the formula and having them go right back out to tax relief, we're going to make sure we're doing as much as we can categorically to make sure that the dollars we're funding in the budget actually go into the schools and actually get into the classrooms. That's something we've been able to accomplish the last few state budgets. So transportation, education, local projects, those are things we fight for every state budget process. And when Krug says the state budget process kind of starts in January, if I started in January, I'd be behind the 8 ball, man. We're cranking at it right now. So if people have ideas for the upcoming state budget, things that you think we need to address, things that need to have importance to you, get those priorities to us right away. You know, we talk a lot about towns and town road budgets all the time, the state budget bill. We want to make sure that we're making sure that you guys have those things that you need too. So those conversations we're having right now to get the budget going and rolling, they're important to reach out to us. And whether it's, COVID-related issues or everything else we have to deal with, time is now to start having those conversations. Senator.
So yeah, it should be noted that as we speak right now, over the last few months, state agencies have been in the process of formulating their budget proposals that they'll then give to the governor, who will then probably report to the legislature sometime in January, February. And I think most importantly is we look forward to the next budget. It's important that we make sure we pass a budget that we can afford. So I mentioned earlier, because of the economic downturn in response to COVID-19, the lack of revenue coming into the state, the fact that our transportation fund's going to likely have a massive hole in it simply because people weren't driving at the rate they were from April through May, as opposed to we were projected to. It's very likely right now that we could face a budget shortfall anywhere between $1 billion to $2 billion. And that is going to have a ripple effect, not just for state government, but also for our school districts, our local municipalities. It's going to be tough. But I will give credit where credit's due, and I think the governor made the right call when he asked his agencies to reduce spending by, I think it was $750 million, because they're aware of that too, that they're likely we're going to have to tighten our belts, make sure that we find ourselves as a state in a financial position that will help us get out of this economic downturn caused by COVID-19. As far as priorities go, I'm glad Nancy touched on it. Dish payments for our critical access hospitals are critically important. Making sure that Wisconsinites in rural underserved areas have access to quality and affordable health care, just like anyone in the Fox Valley or Southeast Wisconsin can receive. And in the last 2 budgets, we've been able to provide increased payments for dish payments. I was recently asked, well, we'd like an increase. Would you like to see an increase? I said at bare minimum, we have to maintain current funding. At minimum. If we can increase funds, absolutely we need to pursue that. Making sure that we're providing more opportunities for frontline healthcare professionals now more than ever. We know that's a huge need, whether it's dealing with mental health professionals, CNAs for our assisted living facilities. We need to make sure that they have the tools and resources, and more importantly, that we can hopefully give them a pay increase going into this next biennium, as they've been overworked and overstressed over the course of the last several months. Some of the other things that Representative Krug mentioned on making sure transportation dollars come back to our local communities. If you remember back in this last budget, the legislature added an additional $90 million pot of money for local road aids. That got tweaked a little bit through the governor's line item veto where that was opened up for all transportation projects. 15 million was put elsewhere. It was a little bit of a disappointment, but the legislature continues to be committed to ensuring that we don't just fund our mega projects in the southeast corridor, I-90, 94, but we're also making sure that our farm and market roads are taken care of as well. So that's going to be a continued priority moving into the next biennium. Things like broadband, the broadband expansion grants through the Public Service Commission, and most importantly, making sure that we have an environment that is going to be conducive for job creation and job growth in this state. I would love nothing more to wave a magic wand and get us back to where we were back in March when we had 3% unemployment. Our economy was the strongest it's been in decades. We've gone through some challenges through COVID-19, but thankful here in the state, unlike some other states around the country, we are in a position to weather the storm better than just about anyone. When you take a look over the last 10 years, the Wisconsin Rainy Day Fund, what was it, back in 2010, 2011, the rainy day fund had like $60 in it.
Yeah.
Now it has $700 million. So we do have those tools available if we do have budget shortfalls to tap into that fund to fill some gaps and holes to make sure that we keep our municipalities, our school districts, that they have the resources that they need going into their budget year as well.
You want to just hang tight there for a second?
Okay.
Good question, Bruce.
We've had a couple questions on and you both mentioned it a little bit, but can you give us an update on the Verso? I know there was a lot of news this week, and Scott will give you a shot at it too.
Yeah, so if anyone hasn't heard, we had the Rapids Together Task Force. We met on Wednesday, and we had an individual from Verso there to give us an update on the status of the mill and potential buyers. And I think all of us were collectively stunned when we were told the news that Verso was going to take the mill off the market. I immediately just about flew off my handlebars, because for the last several months, so many of us in this room who are online right now, collectively we came together to form the task force to explore any and all options for that mill, but also to be there as a resource for the 900 families that have been impacted. And then to have the announcement that, well, not so fast, we're not really serious about finding a new buyer. I was extremely frustrated and disappointed by the announcement, because we have identified buyers. There are several buyers out there who have expressed interest. You have Phoenix Paper out of Shenyang, which is ND Paper's biggest competitor. There's also the Great Lakes Timber producers that came together over the last several months to form a cooperative to explore options to acquire that mill. We have 10,000 logging jobs in northern and western Wisconsin that are being impacted right now, because 25% of all the cordage cut in the state of Wisconsin runs through that mill. And then to have Verso at the last second string us along and say, not so fast, we want to wait until market conditions improve. That just doesn't bode well with me. We need a company that's willing to act in good faith with this community for these families that are being impacted, because it's just not right. I understand from a business decision that they have to take a look at their balance sheet and realize, all right, we got to do what makes sense for our shareholders and for us as a company as a whole, but we simply can't sit there and wait as this community continues to suffer, as Verso just kind of wants to wait till they can get a better price on the mill. My hope is that we can continue to have these conversations and hopefully get more answers out of them. That was one of the things that I brought up towards the tail end of the call, because they said, well, we might open the mill back up if market conditions improve. Well, what does that look like? What benchmarks have to be hit for those doors to reopen? And I also asked them, well, since the change of heart, what conversations have there been had with the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, with Secretary Hughes and Governor Evers on potential incentive packages? If you remember back in 2018, when Kimberly-Clark was in a similar situation, that was only 400 jobs. Governor Walker and WEDC Secretary John Hogan moved heaven and earth after we couldn't get consensus in the legislature to get a bill through to provide an incentive package. They created a playbook that is there, that if we're so serious, we can work as a state, work with the administration to use things like the enterprise zones that have been talked about today, to use tax incentives and tax credits, to get those doors open back up, to have that mill sit there and sit idle while Verso plays games. It's a disservice to the employees, it's a disservice to this community, and a disservice to the paper industry as a whole. So my hope is we can continue to move the needle and the ball down the field, but I was extremely, extremely disappointed, and I can't stress that enough, the frustration from what we heard this Wednesday, and I know that sentiment shared not only in this room, but in this community at large.
You know, and to echo a little bit what Senator Testin said, it was mind-blowing. But if anybody knows me, when somebody tells me we can't or we're not or we won't, it makes me work twice as hard. There is nothing that has been more impactful and more painful to me than Verso in May saying, hey, you know what, we're gonna shut down. It hit me to my heart, hit me to my core, it hit me generationally. I mean, you saw the stories probably 100 times of how I talked about when I got my great-grandfather's retirement pen. And I mean, everybody in my family for decades and generations have been employed through that mill or a mill that was owned by either Consolidated or NewPage or Verso. There's nothing more important right now, and I get that COVID is a major, impactful event to the world. But as we go through our response and our time and making sure that we spend time on issues and items that are important in this area, I've spent more time on Verso than anything else. Whether it's helping people in the industry through the Wisconsin Paper Council help develop ideas for products that are marketable through that mill, researching and contacting and talking to potential buyers and developing this contact with Phoenix Papers, formerly Xinjiang, out of China, to try to help them understand what we have here and to bring them closer to fruition and to find out that Phoenix had actually expressed an interest to Verso about making a sale and making it come together. As much as the Great Lakes Timber professionals have with their Consolidated Co-op, also doing the same thing for Verso to say, no thanks. It's a gut punch, and it is, and it's something that this community needs to really focus in on, and we've done a great job with the Wisconsin Rapids Together Task Force, bringing together everybody out of their individual silos to come together to say, okay, what role in this response can we play? You know, whether it's been from the Heart of Wisconsin Chamber, to the United Way, to the schools, to everybody else on whatever response site. It's DWD, it's WEDC, it's state legislators, it's federal legislators, it's everybody. And it's the one thing that we've done in the last 10 years that I've been at Madison that has been completely nonpartisan. Nobody's ripped anybody for any part of this task force throughout the entire process, which is amazing, which leads me to the bigger message, is that that's the playbook we use moving forward. If we've done this the last 10 years, bringing everybody out of their silos for every individual project to come together to say, hey, we need Sand Valley. Let's pass a bill and bring Sand Valley here. Hey, we need the airport. We need to expand the airport. Let's pass something at the airport here. Hey, we need to save Skyward. Let's get together and figure out a way to save Skyward. That model exists already, and we've used that model, and it's been bipartisan, and it's Representative Shanklin, it's the rest of us up here, it's every central Wisconsin legislator reaching out and saying, hey, these are the things that are important, these are the things that need to get done. This needs to get done. So this week I told Verso, point blank, and it was in the newspapers and everything else, I said they're playing games. Right now, I think it's a negotiating tactic. I honestly do. For Verso to say, yeah, we're not so interested, to know that they have two buyers and they're walking away, quote unquote, right now, I think it's a negotiating tactic to drive interest on those buyers' parts to kind of increase their bids. I don't think Verso's seeing the numbers they want to see, so they're playing this game to say, well, we're not so interested. We're going to keep bringing more buyers. We're going to keep developing more ideas for more products to be produced there. We have talked to so many companies that can come together with different projects for number 16 and number 14 for the pulp mill, for converting, for every single part of that. We have talked to every single employee that's been interested in trying to be a part of this process to figure out, hey, I've worked here for 20 years, I know what this thing can do, why don't we do this? These employees have more ideas of what that mill can produce than any single person sitting up here, any single person in this room. Their input has been absolutely invaluable at this point. I mean, it has been amazing to bring together every single one of those unions onto the task force, have the Labor Council kind of help coordinate some of those things too. You can tell my passion on this. I mean, this is something that we've got to keep pushing harder on Verso for. And that's some of the things that I'm asking people in the community to do, whether you're online or you're here in person today. You know, make sure that, you know, you put these things online, that you post on Facebook that you're disappointed in Verso, that you go on Twitter and use the hashtag at Verso Company. Ask them to reconsider. I mean, it doesn't seem like it makes a big deal, but that public pressure on this company at this point makes all the difference. People need to start weighing in and helping us do that, and I really appreciate everything everybody's done on that so far, but this is a deal we got to get done, so I appreciate the question. Thanks, Greg.
And Angel, how are we on time? I know we have
about 7 minutes.
We have about 7. Anyone I want to ask in the audience, any question?
I actually do have
Okay,
So-
Angel beat you this time, Bill.
So in relation to nonprofits and other entities such as chambers and things like that, I'm kind of going back to COVID-19. There hasn't been a lot of grant opportunities or support that has been coming down to help those organizations. I know we're putting on a chamber charity drive to help do kind of a tip jar to get them additional funds because they're helping us now more than ever. And that funding and those events or donations aren't coming in because the funds aren't available. What do you guys see as a solution to fix this, to help continue supporting those nonprofits in need right now as they're still helping our community?
And the question was about COVID-19 response, and we've heard a lot about business community. Are there things out there we can do to support nonprofits, chambers of commerce, United Ways, those types of entities? I don't know, Nancy, if you want to give a comment, or
If you want to, I don't know. Okay.
I wanted Scott's blood pressure to go down a little.
One of the things that the CARES Act did, and when you bring down those $2 billion to have spent in the state of Wisconsin, every single one of those federal dollars is in the control of the governor. So any program they want to create, whether it's the business grants that we just saw, the second round of business grants, or whether it's funding directly for contact tracers or whatever else it might be, that money again is there. And that's one of the things that, it's the first time I've heard somebody bring that up, and I appreciate that, and that's something we'll ask the governor's office about. Because there is still some of that $2 billion. People forget how big $2 billion is. We hear this all the time that there's a national debt of trillions and the state budget is made billions, but we brought down an additional $2 billion. That's a huge number of money, and there is hundreds of millions of dollars that are unallocated for right now. That money could be spent on that tomorrow. If there is a organization that like WMC that could work to promote that for the chambers, that would be awesome. For the United Way, I think they've got the same advocates. And if those groups could come together and make a petition to say, hey, we would really love to see 20 million, 10 million, 5 million, whatever that might be, to promote that through our legislative offices to the governor, through the CARES Act funding that's already still sitting there unallocated. I think it's something we could do without having to write a bill. I think it's something we can do before we get to the state budget. To add on to that, I think you've done a great job so far getting the business community to understand what's available for them. So I appreciate that, and I think, yeah, you're right, we need to take a look at that. Some of the CARES Act funding has actually gone towards allocations for movie theaters. Some of that CARES Act money has gone towards allocations for the arts. Some of that CARES Act funding has gone into a lot of those types of processes and organizations, so I think it's a valid point. I think it's something we can bring up to the governor's office right away.
Thank you.
Okay, Bill, thank you.
Here.
Bill, do you have a quick one we can?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Something about Foxconn and what's happening there, the promises that were made. What's going on with Foxconn?
Question on any update on Foxconn? I don't know if anybody, this is kind of like the.
I'll just stand here.
Yeah.
One of the things that we found out this week is that WDC has said we're not going to certify the credits for Foxconn, which is fine. I mean, that's exactly the way we wrote that process to work, is that we're not going to put the taxpayers at risk if Foxconn can't deliver. So that's something that they were not able to reach our goals for this year. I actually, like I said, I talked to Missy Hughes yesterday with WDC directly, and Missy and I had that conversation point blank. I said, well, if Foxconn's not going to reach those goals, and we've got $200 million allocated every year for the next however many years, why don't we use that $200 million every year for the next 10 years for the paper industry? Something the loggers and the truckers and the suppliers in the Northwoods who have 10,000 jobs waiting right now, if we're really not going to work on this contract with Foxconn, and Foxconn's going to say, well, we're going to vacillate a little bit, and if we don't get state money, we're not going to keep going, fine. If they want to go, they can go. I mean, that's fine. I don't think they're going to. I think they're honestly going to keep working through COVID and try to build something, create something at some point. But I think honestly, to have that process and that money available and to have a willing and recognizable industry that needs it right now, I think it's a great idea for us. And I told Missy this yesterday, and you can ask her. I said, let's sit down after the election in the next couple of weeks here and let's figure out how to find a way to make that money go to Northwoods, loggers and truckers and the paper industry to see if we can actually get 10,000 jobs created with it.
Oh, very good.
And to kind of add on to that, so the legislation that the three of us had voted for in favor of the Foxconn project going back to 2017 just proves what, despite what is being reported, what has been politicized, is that the legislature didn't simply give this company a blank check.
Right.
They had to hit various benchmarks in order to receive these tax incentives and tax credits from the state of Wisconsin. Now, the company, they haven't hit those benchmarks, so guess what? They haven't received those tax credits, those tax dollars. So that is probably the biggest myth that I've been seeing out there as it relates to the political arena, that, you know, people like myself and others are getting hit on, that, yep, we just gave Foxconn a blank check, carte blanche, do whatever you want, there you go, Terry Gal, have fun with it. No, there were these safeguards put in place for a reason, to make sure that this was the best deal possible for the state of Wisconsin. Now, there's been some discussion, some talks that there may be, that WEDC may want to renegotiate that contract. We'll see how that plays out, but keep in mind, when Foxconn was first formed as a company, you know what they made? They made dials for electric appliances. Not fancy dials, those plastic dials. And this company has evolved over time as market trends have changed. They sent out a press release last week saying that they remain committed to the project down in the Mount Pleasant area, and they want to continue to invest in Wisconsin. But by and large, the biggest takeaway is that they don't grow, they don't get the incentives. They don't invest, they don't get the incentives. So by and large, the taxpayers, again, are protected from, if for some reason they pull the plug. So we hope that they continue, because we should all want to see this project be successful, because if this project's successful, that means there's more jobs, there's more revenue coming to the state, that we're growing the pie. So when we talk about shared priorities going into future bienniums and budgets, well, the best way to grow that revenue is by increasing the number of projects and businesses that come into the state that want to do business here, because Wisconsin is a great place to live, work, and raise a family.
Thank you very much. I don't know if anything to add, okay. I think we're good.
Yep.
Again, thank you everyone that's either online or at Bullseye Golf Club here this morning. Again, we thank Bullseye and the Chamber especially for hosting us. Thank you to our sponsors, Domtar, Enbridge, Ocean Spray Cranberries. Thanks Wisconsin Rapids Media for you being here. You're bringing a great service to the residents in central Wisconsin. Let's give our three elected officials a round of applause for spending time with us this morning. Thank you very much. And I am sure they would be more than happy to speak with you, but please, again, practice social distancing and things. And if you cannot catch up with them today, I know their doors are always open electronically. I've worked with each of their staffs for many years, and they can't get better people to work with, absolutely. Also, a reminder, in your bags, there are information about some upcoming events for the Heart of Wisconsin Chamber of Commerce. So again, thanks everyone for attending. Thank you everyone that's online and live today. Have a great Friday and a great weekend. And remember, there is an election coming up if you haven't heard. So thank you very much. Take care.